Forgive all trespasses against thee. Hold no grudge. Unchain your heart. Free your mind. The sooner the better. Forgiveness is a habit. Hey, it's the Thrive with Cate podcast. I'm recording in Alto, Wyoming. I just got back from a few weeks in Mexico. I'm going to read today from Forgive. And as I read, Forgive is a chapter in my latest book, Uninflamed, 21 Primal Habits. And Primal Habits it's a big book. It's a 90,000 word book. The last couple episodes of the show I read from Purpose and Forgive. And this month is all about up-level your life and how to really up-level from where you're at now to step into potential, to shift your opportunities so that in like 2-3 years down the line, you look back to like this moment and say like, wow, it's a good thing I stepped into my up-level then, because wow, now my capabilities, my prospects, my opportunities are at an entirely different level. And that's why we're doing this focus this month. So I'm going to read a little bit from the chapter Forgive in Uninflamed, and then we'll have a little bit of a chat about it. You are my other me. What I do unto you, I do unto myself. The Mayan moral code. Forgive all trespasses against thee. Hold no grudge. Unchain your heart. Free your mind. The sooner the better. Forgiveness is a habit. Unsurprisingly, the forgiveness habit is an indicator of regenerative health. Karen Schwartz, MD, who directs the Mood Disorders Adult Consultation Clinic at Johns Hopkins University, states, there is an enormous physical burden to being hurt and disappointed. Chronic anger puts you into a fight or flight mode, which results in numerous changes in heart rate, blood pressure, and immune response. Those changes then increase the risk of depression, heart disease, and diabetes, among other conditions. Forgiveness, however, calms stress levels, leading to improved health. Forgiveness kicks in the loop that creates transformational change. No forgiveness, no transformation. Forgive to evolve. Forgiveness requires a conscious effort. It does not occur without intention. The action is deliberately letting go of resentment towards the person who wronged you. You forgive, whether the other is deserving or undeserving. This includes forgiving yourself. No vengeance on yourself either. What happens if I forgive the transgression? Against myself, against thee. The load lightens. The heart relaxes physically. The body exhales. Forgiveness is an act. The act can become your habit. As you release, you rewire your feelings from resentment to compassion, anger to empathy, and sometimes even hostility to affection. How? Forgiveness towards yourself and everyone else follows the same path. 1, you notice you are holding a grudge. 2, you pause to consider the root of the grudge. 3, you have a revelation, a crack of insight. You see a different perspective as possible. 4, your insight leads to a change of heart. This requires overcoming emotions and abandoning resentment. Good for you. 5, you get the benefit of feedback. 6, you achieve rapprochement in communication and in community. 7, you feel the magic of forgiveness. 8, the feedback upcycles as a lesson learned, rewiring the entire experience as a positive stressor. Processing forgiveness generates feedback. The feedback is the next essential propeller for the loop to become transformational. Integrating the feedback is the third step. The rapprochement part is where feedback is allowed to be received, a bow to the ego, which shows a willingness to learn, a receptivity to the experience of the other person. And this might generate a revelation when you hear it. The intentions you thought so unacceptable or wrong might be different than expected. The lack of insight might enter the darkness, perhaps even the other didn't mean you any harm. Understanding their point of view and sharing your own, honestly, may lead to forgiveness and repair. No one wants to be in a disrespectful relationship, including you with yourself. In the habit of self-forgiveness, you churn self-disdain into a modicum of self-respect. You understand human nature more honestly from forgiving, which propels you to explore next-level connections, experiences, and growth. Forgive our idiosyncrasies and even our past ideologies. Release ideologies by evolving original thought so that true acts of forgiveness become possible. You realign what you put your heart behind based on lessons learned. Forgiveness, including self-forgiveness, is never the path of complacency. If you remember an event in your past in negative, painful terms, look for unresolved judgments. Forgiveness is a slow, deep, layered process. You may find that beneath one layer of pain and resentment, there's another, deeper and harder to grasp. Keep going. It's worth it. It's a kind of archaeology. It may be a lifetime's work, but have you got anything better to do? Do you know of anything else that will bring the same kind of freedom, joy, and increased vitality? I don't. How about when rapprochement or reconciliation is impossible? Can you resolve your grudge without resolving the issue with the other? The answer is yes. Forgiveness is still possible when you find peace with the mystery of the experience. A problem shared is a problem half solved, and that too is enough for the feedback loop to upcycle you. It's better to be at peace than to hold onto a pattern. Consider this. If you do not actively forgive, you generate an enemy in your mind. This can knock you off your chosen path. If you do not thoroughly forgive, then you do not fully heal. To forgive, study rapprochement. Rapprochement. From the French rapprocher, combining expressing extensive, intensive force, with approcher, to approach. That is precisely how every feedback resolution cycle feels. In the hot pursuit of resolution, rapprochement requires an intensive force, real, determined effort to approach and express yourself. Expressing requires accurate words combined with accurate feelings. Fake the funk doesn't work for forgiveness. Rapprochement is a process of replacing destructive responses with constructive actions. Disrespect must be churned into respect, pride into humility, grievance into grace. Willingness to change and behave differently in the future is often required for true acceptance, for the relationship to move forward. We grow through feedback. Rapprochement involves feedback, willingness to change, and acceptance. That's reconciliation. Good parents have strong feedback loops for both positive and negative behaviors. This is true for good trainers and leaders of all kind. Practice feedback loops and forgiveness cycles with humbleness and honesty. Notice what changes. Grudges are outgrown. The atmosphere amplifies with the connection. Rapprochement kindles the evolution of your relationships. Forgiveness rekindles the value. Forgiveness as a habit. Perhaps it looks something like this. You decide to forgive. Unequivocally, you decide to process each and all transgressions, even your transgressions against yourself. You entertain a conscious change of heart to digest and dissolve emotional pain into inner resolution. You build the habit of processing transgressions and trespasses in real time. You see the benefit of the doubt. You extend to yourself the benefit of the doubt as you extend it to others. You flex the habit of releasing others In doing so, you release yourself because there was never really any separation. You reflect, you learn, you truly forgive. So with Uninflamed and the 21 Primal Habits, like some of these habits came easier to me than others. Some of them are still a massive, massive challenge and endeavor for yours truly, right? Just because you write the book on it doesn't mean. So, certain habits like walk, crawl, run, or rub, or silence and sleep, those habits are much easier for me. Even fast, even eat dirty, ferment, sip, those are easy habits for me. Forgive, hard. Focus, easy. Purpose, super easy. Forgive, hard. Did I mention hard? Now, forgiveness to the self, I tended to have a reflex of like, I shoulda, woulda, coulda done better. And what forgiveness with self has helped me realize is that I made the best decisions that I could for myself at the time, with what I knew at the time. And that level of self-compassion has created so much more joy in my kidneys. Like I can literally feel it as joy in my kidneys. Because I have joy in my kidneys, I need way less caffeine in my kidneys, right? I don't need as much like adrenaline. I don't need to push against myself because I'm more supported from within. So when I notice myself like blaming myself, holding this grudge against my past self for something that I did, now I have more of a reflex of pausing and realizing that that's the outdated thought pattern. The yogis would call that the vritti, right? The vritti, V-R-I-T-T-I, the vritti. It's like, no, that's taking me out of flow. Yes, recognize it now. Encapsulate it, right? Encase it, like work with it, surround it with forgiveness, with connection, with this three-step process of rapprochement. And this is like one to learn. Feedback. Now, what is feedback in this situation where I wish I had made a better decision at the time? So feedback is like, okay, what were the signs and signals I was getting then? And to really receive the part of me that wants to hold the grudge, to really receive like, okay, there was information there that I could have paid more attention to receive that feedback. To be willing to change in the future, like, okay, if I receive feedback like that, maybe it's from my body, maybe it's from other people, maybe it's showing up in pathological ways in my relationship. To receive the feedback from the self, saying like, okay, there are signs and symbols, there are signs and signals, there are things that happen from the past. Now, if I can get the feedback, be willing to receive those signals in the present and in the future, and accept, right? To accept that, okay, I'm listening. I get it. I'm listening. And I can then accept that my past self had some information to move through to my current self. I can receive and accept that now in a place of love, in a place of wholeness, in which I have a better informed future without holding a grudge against my past self. And I can also then, so that's one side of the story. The other side of the story was like, yes, and we did the best that we could at the time. And so then my part that wants to hold a grudge, right, like I should have known better, has to receive that part. Has to get that part of like, actually, that was a younger version of me. And I was all in. And I did the best I could at the time, given the circumstances. And then when I receive that part, now I'm in a more harmonious union. I think you guys followed me on that. Mm-hmm. It's easier to see it with others, right? Because the separate self, how you separate yourself from others. We're in this victim culture. It's so bizarre. It's so bizarrely fascinating too. Like the desire, like if you're a victim, there's a desire to hold a grudge. There's a desire to create separation and otherness, othering. That's sometimes what it's called now. And so for those of you who feel like you're a victim, whether it's a victim to a system, whether it's a victim to a person or an organization, it's really cool to get good at rapprochement. So rapprochement involves 3 steps: feedback, willingness to change, and acceptance. Now, it's a two-partner dance, right? This rapprochement. So with reconciliation, well, let me give an example. So when Indy was, I think, about 7, I noticed, this is going to be somewhat personal, but I noticed this pattern in our household that, and this can happen when it wasn't safe for children to be wrong. They build a secondary structure of not admitting when they're wrong, which means there's never forgiveness or rapprochement, which means there's never deeper intimacy that happens as a result of reconciliation, and it's a pattern. Okay, so I don't have this pattern, but my husband had this pattern, and I noticed that he couldn't really he couldn't really go into a deep forgiveness cycle because he didn't want to it's like admit where he would behave differently in the future than he did in the past, something like that. That's willingness to change, right? So if you never are really sorry for anything, if you never really get into that emotional, oh, it's so hard, right? That like, oh, where you break down, you start to break down the pattern of like, oh, fuck, I messed up. And I'm going to admit that, right? But we created a safe enough space that he could do that. And we had to, and this is what I want to emphasize, we had to, because I noticed my daughter was developing the same pattern where she wouldn't kind of fess up. Like she wouldn't be willing to change. She wouldn't be open and vulnerable and be like, damn, I really am not proud of what I did there in that situation. I want to behave differently in the future. So that's rapprochement. And if one person in a core relationship can't do rapprochement, awesome, you guys, like awesome, great. Then that's the skill to develop. It's just a skill. So forgiveness is just a skill. It's like kids need to learn how to load the dishwasher, right? So that it's not like total chaos in there. It's a skill, loading the dishwasher. Forgiveness is a skill. Rapprochement is the core part of the skill. Feedback, willingness to change, and acceptance. Now to really get in there, right, it requires slowing things down so that we're not in a rush for the process to happen, that we create a structure around it. We create a time around it, right, where it's like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to work on reconciliation and rapprochement, and we're going to get good at this, and we're just going to use this situation, whatever this situation is, to get good at this skill. And what that can do is, in some ways, it can kind of depersonalize it. Like in a way, it's like it's less about the actual situation and more about building a good lifelong skill. I've got to say, I love this as a team leader, as a company leader. I love it when my team members can fess up and go through a reconciliation cycle. I try to really demonstrate the way on this. I learned this from Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. It's such a good book. It's such a good teaching. He's got 1 million podcast interviews on this now on YouTube. It's really his core teaching of like taking extreme ownership. And when we can do that in our core relationship, especially as parents with our children, for those of you who are leading team members, when you can do that with your team, when you can do that with your company, oh my gosh, it now enables so much of a greater connection, because then people aren't afraid to admit mistakes. They're not afraid to think big, fail fast, right? Think big, test small, fail fast, learn always. Like we learn through growing together. We learn through what doesn't work. And that's okay. So as long as we can recognize that we're all on a growth path and hang out with other people that are on a growth path, you are going to find people that want to practice forgiveness, which is why it's a core habit in Club Thrive. Because this is the core habit that leads to greater intimacy, which leads to greater connection, which leads to being able to do greater things from a place of interconnectedness, which leads to positive global change for the future of the planet and our species. All right. So I'm really inviting you guys, those of you who listen to the podcast, into uplevel your life. I just created a course. It's $1,000. As a podcast listener, you get $900 off, which brings it down to $97. Uplevel Your life is found at clubthrive.global/uplevel. And why would you want to do uplevel your life? Well, because you want to uplevel your life. So we're going to figure out exactly what that means. Like in every sector, like your investments, how to be a better investor, how to be better in your career or in your company, how to be better in leadership. Like, what does your up level look like in family, in partnerships, in your body, and in healing? So we're going to look at all the aspects of your life and say, for you, what are the decision points right now? And we're going to work you through a process where we're going to coach you one-on-one through the process. So there's 2 live sessions with us that are one-on-one, just on you and your up level. And then by the end, you'll have put a value on your up level. So you'll know how to move capital and focus into your up level and why you would do that, why you would take on risk rather than just being distracted from life in the whirlwind of our ever-shortening attention spans. All right. You can make big shit happen in your life. I believe in you. Signing off, Cate at Thrive with Cate, formerly the Yoga Healer podcast.